Welcome to The Lineman Life, a podcast for power professionals. Here's your host, David Spooner.
Welcome to another episode of The Lineman Life, a podcast about you, the power professionals that keep the lights on. Before we get started today, I had a question sent to me about how to subscribe to the podcast on an Apple iPhone. Now, pre-installed when you get your iPhone, there is an app called the podcast app. It's a purple symbol. It's pretty easy to spot. If you just scroll through your apps there, you'll see it. Now, if you go into that podcast app and you click down at the bottom, there's a magnifying glass there. If you click on that and you put in the Lineman Life podcast, it's going to pull up the podcast, and you'll be able to click on that. It's just a button there that says subscribe, which is going to allow you to have the podcast every week. When I release a podcast, it's going to automatically show up there. You don't have to do anything else after you get it subscribed on your iPhone. And every week it'll be right there, and you can listen to all the back episodes, or when a new one comes in, you can listen to it. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about communication. So many things have changed over the last 30 years for linemen. 30 years ago, we didn't have FR clothing. We didn't have high-vis clothing. We didn't even wear vests. We didn't do anything, any kind of traffic-rated stuff. We didn't even have it. 30 years ago, we didn't wear harnesses in the bucket. We had a little belt. It was basically just a belt with a strap on it. And if you fell out that bucket, it's probably going to break you in half. So no harnesses back then, which that's a good thing we have them today. Harnesses are a great thing. 30 years ago, there was a lot of yelling, bullying, and screaming for communication on the crew. There's less of that going on today, but we still could use some improvement on it. Linemen are not known for liking change. Some things just take a while. This bad communication thing is one of those things that's taken a while. We can't operate like we did 30 years ago. If you go about communication the wrong way today, you could find yourself out of a job, under investigation, or with all the lawyers today, you might even find yourself wrapped up in a lawsuit. Also, when you don't communicate well with your crew members, people can get hurt or die. So the way you communicate today is very important. You already know to be good at your job, you have to know how to do line work. But what about your communication skills? Communication skills are a close second behind knowing what to do when you're up there in the bucket. Every lineman can be a better lineman by learning these communication skills. We all have communication challenges while we're working out on the crew. We work with all different kind of people. People are going to push your buttons. People aren't going to listen. You have to deal with people you don't like. It's easy to get mad, shut down, blow your stack, lose your focus. But you don't have to go through that. Communication is something you can learn just like when you learned how to frame a pole or hang a transformer. Once you learn how to deal with people and situations, you can move to a new level, avoid stress, and enjoy what you do for a living. Learning communication skills is important for every person on the crew because everyone on the crew is a mentor for somebody. If you're the foreman, you're a mentor for your lineman. If you're a lineman, you're a mentor for the apprentices. If you're an apprentice, you mentor younger apprentices or helpers. Good communication is needed if you're going to mentor somebody. Today we're going to talk about 3 key communication skills that will help all linemen improve and be better at their jobs. One of the first things you need to learn is emotional control. If you can't control yourself, how do you expect to work with other people? This was a huge challenge for me. For several years, I was on a one-man service truck. Caught all the trouble, ran all the services, and worked on about 6,000 streetlights in our service territory. There was also a couple of crews working out of that same base yard. Now, back then, my truck was a 35-foot High Ranger. That was the best truck I ever had. It was just large enough to have a good reach on the bucket, but just small enough for me to handle by myself and get into tight areas. The guys on the crew liked my truck too. On occasion, they would borrow my truck on call out. So when I'd come in the morning, my truck would be trashed with old material, all my truck stock missing. I would literally blow up like a volcano, yell at people, start thinking how am I going to pay them back. It would ruin me for the rest of the day. So one day my manager, and this guy was a young baby-faced engineer just straight out of college, he saw me and he saw that I was pissed off. David, you need to change your approach. They're just doing it to push your buttons and watch for the reaction. Next time, walk off for a while, calm down, then come back. Ask for help to clean your truck off and see how that works for you. A couple weeks later, I came in. When I walked in, I saw my truck was trashed. I was fuming, but I didn't let it show. I took my manager's advice. I walked off and went in to do my paperwork. I then headed out to the warehouse after about 30 minutes. I walked up to the foreman on the crew and said, "Can you guys help me clean my truck off?" It was all I could do to stay calm. I was thinking, if you give me a smart-ass answer, it's on. "Okay, Spooner, no problem." He told a couple of apprentices to go clean off my truck. You know what? I actually went out there and helped them clean off my truck, and then I helped them clean off their trucks. I use this process every time in the future, and 90% of the time, my truck was clean before I even finished my paperwork in the morning. Getting mad, blowing up, wanting to pay somebody back, make them suffer, it doesn't do anybody any good. It could be holding you back in your career as a lineman. This kind of behavior is frowned upon today. You know, this is a corny saying, but it's a good saying. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is a great motto. So this next skill goes hand in hand with emotional control, and that is assertiveness. Notice I said assertive, not aggressive. As a lineman, you're responsible for training the apprentices that come up under you. It's what we do. Somebody taught you, now you pass down what you learned. You're also partially responsible for their safety as well. 30 years ago, all linemen were aggressive or borderline aggressive. I've seen people have hard hats thrown at them. I've seen people put in headlocks. I've seen people screamed at right up in their face. I worked with a couple linemen that if you were a smartass, they wanted to whip your ass. And I'm not kidding. These guys were serious. On more than one occasion, I've seen linemen holding people back from duking it out on the crew. That's just how we were taught. Aggression was normal. And apprentices and helpers were expected to be submissive. One thing about back then, you knew where you stood. And sometimes that was a good thing. If you got out of a line as an apprentice, there was always somebody there going to set you straight. You know, I always knew it was about work. It was nothing personal. So I just learned to deal with it. But society's changed. And so we've had to adapt. Aggressiveness today is wrong, and it's a one-way ticket to a pink slip. So how do you tell if you're being aggressive? If you're being aggressive, it's all about you and winning. You're not respectful of others, and you consider hurting others as successful. If you curse, swear, belittle others, that is aggressive. Today, you can't be aggressive. In this day and age, it will get you terminated, and I mean quickly. I have seen it. But David, how do I get my point across? You can still get your point across. Here's the key. You should be assertive, not aggressive. When you're assertive, it's telling someone, I want this, I expect that. It's still about you, but it comes from doing what is best for them to learn this profession. You know, apprentices, they need to hear what you want, what you feel, what you need. That is how they grow into competent linemen. We're not looking for slaves, but people on this job can get hurt if they don't listen. So you have to be direct. So here's an example of what I mean. A good assertive example is, I feel like you don't know how to frame out that crossarm. You need to study your spec book. Or, I don't like how you made that termination. It's not going to work like that. I want you to do it like this. Do you see the difference between aggression and assertive? You can be as direct as you want. Just make sure it comes from a teacher or coach's perspective, not I'm better than you and I will win perspective. The third thing you need to learn is to be consistent. Do you know about anyone that you work with that's not consistent? They don't treat everybody the same. They overlook bad behavior by some people, and some people do the exact same thing and get away with it. They won't be honest with people who don't like feedback, maybe because they're scared of the conflict. They have their little pets or their little cliques they protect. And these types of people come across as inconsistent and unfair. And this is not just directed at supervisors. Like I've already said, we're all a mentor to someone, a lineman, an apprentice, a helper. When you are not consistent, it makes people think you're not fair. No one wants to be treated differently. If you find yourself falling into some of these behaviors, you need to think about how people look at you. If you want to get more buy-in from others on your crew, you need to be more consistent in your approach. I'm not saying you're a pushover. Just treat everyone equally. The lineman who trained me, Rick, he was a tobacco-chewing, cursing SOB. He was a great lineman, very knowledgeable. He was consistent in dealing with apprentices. He didn't put up with a lot of nonsense. He didn't put up with a lot of nonsense from anybody, not just apprentices. He expected you to do your job. Rick was always direct in his method to teach people. One day we're working at an elementary school replacing some cutouts on a bank pole. It was recess. All the school kids were lined up against the fence watching us. Rick was up in the bucket, and I was the ground man. So Rick wanted some new jumpers on the cutouts. I was just moving right along, waiting until he asked for his material, and I see the bucket coming down. Spooner, you're waiting on me to ask for everything. Why can't you anticipate what I'm going to do and have it ready before I ask? If I have to ask you for everything, what kind of ground man are you? Now, you already know that I wasn't very good at taking feedback, so it pissed me off. And it was embarrassing, especially, even though it was only school kids, it was still embarrassing to have him talk to me like that. But, Rick didn't care. He called it like he saw it. Now that I look back on that day, I see Rick didn't single me out. The one thing about Rick was he was consistent. He didn't care if you were a ground man, an apprentice, a journeyman. He was always honest with his feedback, whether you liked it or not. You know, we used to joke about it. Watch out for the wrath of Rick. Rick was tough, but always fair. He never let bad behavior on the crew go by without addressing it. This is how you should be in dealing with people on your crew. If you're in any kind of coaching role, be consistent and fair when you deal with everyone. When there's bad behavior, don't wait to deal with it. People breaking safety rules, talking on the phone, deal with it quickly, no matter who it is. We all have people we like and some people we don't like. Deal with the ones you can't stand, just like the ones you really like. I worked for a VP one time who used to have the saying, you might not love them, but you got to work with them. The consistent approach will be better for the entire crew. You don't have to be a jerk, but people need to know where you stand. People want to be treated equally. If you're consistent and everyone knows what to expect from you, they can learn to deal with your style. So what communication skills does every lineman need to become a better lineman? We learned you have to keep yourself under emotional control. There's no need to blow up like I did when the line crew used my truck. If you get pissed off, walk off, cool down, and then rejoin the conversation. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a great saying everyone can remember. We also learned that you have to be assertive, not aggressive when dealing with others. Aggressive will get you fired or investigated. Aggressive is all about you. Aggressive comes from I'm gonna win attitude. There's no need for cursing, belittling, or swearing at people. Instead, you need to be assertive to get your point across. I want this. I need that. You did that. It's still about your wants, but assertive comes from a teaching attitude instead. You're doing what's best for them to grow. Lastly, we learned you have to be consistent. My lineman Rick was consistent in the way he treated everyone. He didn't care who you were. You must treat everyone the same no matter who they are and whether you like them personally or not. Treat the people you don't like the same as everyone else. Let me leave you with this. To be a complete lineman, you've got to be able to teach and mentor others. You could be the most knowledgeable lineman in the world about how to do your job, but if you can't communicate what you know and have people want to listen, your knowledge will eventually be lost. You know, I challenge you, put these 3 things we talked about into action. If you're a helper, apprentice, journeyman lineman, or foreman, use these skills you learn to improve yourself, help others, and enjoy your job more. That wraps up this episode of the Lineman Life podcast. Head over to my website, thelineman.life. There you can find all the past episodes, you can see the show notes, and you can find my contact information. I appreciate you listening. Remember, keep safe, and you are your brother's keeper. This is David Spooner saying aloha from the Big Island of Hawaii.